There was a recognition that we were on the cusp of a technology revolution that was fundamentally going to change the world. The political stakes were quite high, and the stakes for the country were high because had we not pulled this off, we would have not enjoyed the benefits of a competitive, efficient wireless network that all Americans enjoy today. In the early years of licensing, wireless phones were the province of the very wealthy. It was a status symbol in America to have one because they were so expensive. I think it's because it took a lot of time to get spectrum in the marketplace through the beauty contests and lotteries. You know, a lot of small entrepreneurs would buy tickets in the lottery knowing that ultimately there'd be a process whereby they could sell it to folks that actually wanted to build a network. So it took a long time. It was very inefficient, and it didn't create a competitive market structure or return any of that value to the American taxpayer. Auction authority changed all that. Auctions were really a revolutionary concept. Economists had been talking about it for a long time, but a lot of people in Washington and government thought it was sort of a pipe dream. The incumbent telcos didn't want auction authority. A lot of people at the time didn't think it was really going to work, that it wasn't going to deliver a lot of revenue to the Treasury, and that we would burden the telcos with the cost of having to buy spectrum. Senator Markey, then Congressman Markey, he was a hero in this process. And he understood that the only way to get this legislation passed was effectively to bypass the Commerce Committee and go through the Budget Committee. And so the auction authority was not in a communications law. It was in the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, which was an effort to balance the budget. And it passed with the narrowest of majorities. It passed by one vote. So when you think about what could have happened, we almost didn't get auction authority. And that would have changed the course of the history of the wireless industry. Congress gave us the authority, but to their credit, they really didn't know the best way to do this. And they delegated that to the FCC to make that decision. We knew that for this to be successful, it wasn't going to be designed by FCC lawyers. It had to be designed by economists and people who understood game theory. And so we allowed them to come up with what they thought was the best approach for this auction. The key thing that the team wanted to do was to have an auction that would find the most efficient price, because we knew that whoever bought that spectrum would have to then go and finance the build-out of the wireless systems. And if they overpaid, it would not be economic to build the network. We were worried that people who didn't want the auctions to take place would launch all sorts of legal attacks, that we had not developed a record, that we were doing something that was too unconventional, that wasn't going to work. What if the computers crashed? What if there was a delay in the network and you couldn't get the bids? You have to tune out the noise, because there are all these people coming at you and they want a certain outcome, and they're lobbying their friends on Capitol Hill who are putting pressure on you. And you just have to tune that out and figure out what's best for the country. It wasn't until we got into it and we saw the bids coming in that we realized that it was working. It was like a moonshot. You know, people were staying up all night, nerves were frayed. We got lucky that we had some people in the government who were not only good policymakers, they were just good operational leaders, good managers. And once it was over, there was just a great sense of relief that we had avoided what we had all feared most, which is not only a failed technical auction, but that we wouldn't raise much money. So that vindication was one of my most satisfying moments in government. You saw some really significant players coming in and building new businesses to compete, which was all to the benefit of consumers. It motivated new players to come into the wireless marketplace. And a lot of people in the business community realized that this was a pretty good way to help develop a nationwide wireless industry. And then this was replicated all around the world. Later in my career, when I was ambassador to the European Union, I reflected on my early days at the FCC when I would go over to Europe and convince them of the benefit of auctions. And, that's very satisfying, right? When you come up with a regulatory policy and it's copied all around the world, that's a cool thing. It changed the way people lived, the way they did business, the way they entertained themselves, the way they shopped, the way they got health care. That was just the beginning of it. And it was a recognition that government policy had something good to do about that. We've learned that wireless technology is a great equalizer in a lot of ways because particularly in geographies where it's not economic to string wires or fiber, wireless is the solution. It's a way to get good broadband connections to people who wouldn't otherwise have it. And you've got to have spectrum to fuel those platforms and technology. So it's really important if we want to close the digital divide, we're not going to do it just with fiber and coax cable. We've got to have a wireless solution. And if we don't get that auction authority back, really the whole progress that we've made in closing the digital divide is going to be at risk.